For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Sarie. Author Heinrich Bumker joins me today to discuss his book, Sarie. Hi, Heinrich.
Hello, Sarie.
So, tell us a bit about yourself and the reason behind your fascination for political fiction.
Well, I'm a trainer and a consultant and in the labor law field. So I enter companies or government departments in a moment of crisis and I mediate those conflicts, and if the conflicts can't be mediated, sometimes I'm used to investigate and prosecute misconduct. And there's always political subtexts. In South Africa, a lot of stuff that happens in companies has a political, a racial agenda, an ideological subtext. In my past, as well as a sort of student activist, everyone was a student activist in the past, and I was one of those. And I've developed a fascination with politics, ideology, strategy, and how those things shape society as opposed to just an individual villain. And I work a lot with journalists in Africa. I edit some of their stories for them. And again, you can't escape politics. So I like political fiction as a genre because the driving force in the narrative, the pulse of the story, is political events, elections, politicians, deals, that kind of stuff.
This is your first novel?
Correct.
Can you briefly tell us about your book?
Yes. It's basically 5 people who arrive at an East London hotel on the same day. There's a car guard, a down-and-out car guard who's sick and tired of hustling. There's a government bureaucrat, a chief of staff to a premier, and he hates his boss, but he needs to swing one last tender his way, and then he's set for life. You've got a psychologist who's kind of crazed by racial dynamics that he's gone through in his life, and he's on this mission to do this one political dramatic act that he thinks will restore Khoikhoi lands to his people. And then you've got sort of wafting through that hotel on the same day, you've got this mysterious girl who thinks she's from the 1800s, and all these people sort of meet, and she brings them together in some way, and there's all sorts of stuff that happens in this hotel over a period of, say, 12 to 13 hours.
What was your inspiration for writing this book?
Actually, friends of mine. I would send them, I started off by sending people a few chapters, not thinking I really had it in me. And they were so enthusiastic about it, and they kept begging me for another chapter. And then after a while, I got to the point where I was halfway through, nearly to a book length, and I thought, well, maybe I can actually do this. And so they just inspired me to continue. And then the story took over because I hadn't planned the thing properly at all. It was just a sketch. And then I wanted to find out how the story ended. I didn't know, right until almost the end. I didn't know what happens to Sarie and what happened to the other characters. So I had to write the thing to just finish it, just to see where it all ended up.
What's the major theme in your book?
There are quite a few, but I'd say the big one would be unfinished business. That things come back to haunt us. And in this country, there's a lot of unfinished business. And we like to think of it in the economic realm, but I actually think that politics is taking place more and more now in the psychological realm. So it's about the way in which unfinished business is starting to have psychological effects in political decisions. Not rational economic decisions, but psychological, irrational decisions, which doesn't necessarily mean bad, but it just means that the emotions have made a comeback into the political realm in quite a big way.
Your book is South African. It is set in a local city. You've got local slang in your book. You mentioned local stores and products. Why was it important to keep the novel local?
Your characters must be real, and none of my characters are these jet-setting people who are internationalists. They're very rooted in their city, and as such they speak the language of their city and their country. And I mean, I'm not going to have characters go off for breakfast in a cozy restaurant overlooking the sea, they're going to go to Wimpy because that's a South African brand. And of course, I'm hoping for product placement money to come in after the fact. I'm just joking, not really.
Tell us about the research behind your book and the development of your characters.
So I'm fascinated by frontier history, Eastern Cape frontier, early colonialism. There's all those diaries that people wrote, all those accounts of ethnographers and anthropologists of the early contact between the various races. The Boers, the English settlers, Khoikhoi people, Xhosas. There's a whole sort of milieu, and it's fascinating. So I've bought a lot of books over time, so I'm immersed in that history just through reading it. But then there was a particular incident at a particular farm near Cookhouse called Verkeerdewater, and it's quite an amazing farm because stuff just happens on that farm. There was a Boer rebellion that took place there, and people were shot. And there was in this particular case, there was a band of Khoikhoi and Xhosa warriors who together sort of started attacking farms in the area, also on this one farm, Verkeerdewater. And so I drilled down into that history quite a lot. But then I had to look at other interesting stuff. I had to research hopscotch, which used to be called Scotch hoppers, antipsychotic drugs and how long they take to take effect, and all sorts of MacGyver stuff. How do you make fires with stain remover and stuff like that? So, you sometimes you've got to really research stuff you never thought. It's this marginal part of the plot, but you've got to get it right. And it takes you maybe a week or so just to find out, does this actually work in real life?
Were your characters based on people that you've encountered?
Composites of people that I've encountered, but more than that, people that I'd like to encounter. So almost people at their best in a bad situation.
So the African politics is woven into your book, and in one chapter you mentioned that some people rose to power by plotting their way through the treacherous structures of the ANC.
Yes.
So despite this being a fictional novel, do you fear backlash for your political themes?
Maybe. I don't think that's important enough for a backlash, but if a backlash happens, you've got to take the punch. It's the natural order of things that if you offend the high and mighty, they're going to, be upset. And it's natural, and you must take it. It's a price you must pay. But on the other hand, having said that, the ANC is now a South African institution. So if you're going to write a story about a politician, the chances are he's going to be in the ANC, just like it's a Democrat or a Republican in America. So, it's not personal, although it is also political, because the themes of the book are this once great organization that's starting to crumble under its own weight, and you can't duck the fact that the book implicitly does criticize government.
Did you yourself learn anything from writing this book?
The writing part is the easiest. That's what I've learned. It's the publishing, and that's why it's probably good to be in a publishing house. The publishing and the distribution is really the terrible and the hard part. I can't think of how many books might be out there that have just fallen by the wayside because there's just no publishing mill for. If you don't get into one of the big publishing groups, you don't get distribution so easily. It's a bit of a problem. But I was very lucky that my publisher, Bryony from Marshall Publishing, in Windhoek, sort of believed in the book and did, and therefore made sure that it's sort of out there.
What do you hope people will take away from your book after reading it?
The way I've written the ending is that the ending belongs to the readers, and I've had lovely discussions with people afterwards, and each of them have had a different understanding of who survived, and so that's really, it's for them, their ending. It's almost who do they want to survive is who they project into the final chapters, and so that's what I'd like them to take away from it. I'd like them to take away their own desires fulfilled in the ending, or fears perhaps fulfilled in the ending. And then also perhaps that we've got all sorts of problems in South Africa, but it's our crankiness that sometimes sees us through, and our resistance and aversion to bullshittery that sees us through. and there's some characters who, evince that. I think those are going to be the survivors in South Africa in the long run.
Can we expect more fictional works from you in future?
God willing, yes.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was Heinrich Böhmke discussing his book, Sarie.